It's Chris, 2021, November. We're looking back at it, ranking, reviewing all of the biggest crowdfunding projects from that now 2 years running. How do they stack up? Do they stack up? Was it just another hype of cycle of hotness? Or did actually a couple of them have a teensy bit of staying power? Let's talk. First up, Weather Machine, Lacerda. You're going, yeah, that was a good Lacerda, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's ranked in the top 700 of Board Game Geek, which, is relatively respectable. Out of curiosity, I went over for something that raised 7 digits, compared it to several of its predecessors in the Eagle Griffin Lacerda line. Your Kanbans, your Lisboas, your On Marses. It's ranked significantly lower than all those. Now, granted, it's only been out for like a year or two, so it still has some time to make its way up the chart. I don't know. Deeper circles, deeper, heavier gamer circles. Does this one hold up? Is it as good as the others? I don't really see it being talked about as the others. I don't see it, like a lot of these show up in the secondary market, hardly at all. Most of these Lacerda junkies are Lacerda junkies. The one foray Eagle Griffin had, the bot factory into the lighter side of things, kind of flopped. Again, not as a horrible game, but didn't get traction whatsoever. Something like Roxley, where they're putting out bigger name products. I was looking for Radlands behind me. They have a broad smorgasbord of stuff, right? They put something out and people go, whoa. Eagle Griffin's got one core audience. Again, like several of these companies, Chip Theory, Garfill, they've got their type. Even AEG or Flat Out, right? I don't know with this one. Per many comments I've seen, it's one of the more difficult Lacerdas to wrap your mind around, I guess. A little bit more abstract-y, a little bit harder to click. I don't know. The tricky part with this is everybody has their flavor of this style of game, right? Just very similar to everybody's style or flavor of dungeon crawl. You can make the example that dungeon crawls are all very similar, but yet somehow when you play them, they all turn out completely different in who likes your Oathsworns versus your Aeon Trespass versus your Chronicles of Grunagor versus your Midaras versus your Zombicide. People are going to argue about Zombicide being a crawler. It is. That's a light crawler, right? But that's going to be the question that you have to ask yourself in this one. I don't really think it's made its wave necessarily yet. But as we know with Board Game Geek, if you really want to wait around long enough, these heavy games will slowly niche and march their way up to the top, and there's nothing you can say or do about it as a whole. Sort of facetious, sort of just funning with you. Speaking of heavy games, though, let's just stay with heavy games this month. Hegemony. Again, a lot heavier game than people said, right? This is, I'll make the comparison here, the root equivalent for your heavy game junkies. Your asymmetric class factions that are going up head to head. Actually blows Weather Machine right out of the water. Didn't do that, I don't think, in funding, but it definitely did that on the ranking so far. 8.5, right? This is the 116th best strategy game ever made. 254. By the time you're viewing this, it might even crack the top 250. But a playtime of 3 hours and the asymmetry and the depth of something like a Root for heavy gamers, and that makes it a tough sell for someone interested in it in the first place as a game you just can't dip your toes into. Don't be fooled when it says political, economic, card-driven. Yeah, right, card-driven. 2 to 4 players. One of your fictional groups that you're taking on. I remember just prior to the campaign, I touched base with them on Facebook. Awesome marketing that Facebook is. Actually, it's how I've gotten in contact with a fair number of publishers. But that being said, they were like, hey, would you like to try it? And I was like, And then I looked at the rulebook and I was like, no. Again, this one highlights the heavy skewing on Board Game Geek for heavy games in the first place. Nothing wrong with that as long as you know what you're getting into on the Board Game Geek rankings, because Board Game Geek rankings are like sponsored videos on Board Game Geek, right? You can't tell what's what. Just kidding. They label those pretty well, but they magically all of a sudden always pop up to the top of their little feeds there. I mean, you gotta get the clicks and get your money's worth, right? I don't know. This one is never gonna probably hit my table. I can't play a game that's going to be this heavy for this long of time. If you told me you could streamline this into 3 hours, into 1.5 hours, I'd be all for it. That's my biggest trepidation right now at the time of me filming this, with the recently acquired Voidfall sitting on my kitchen floor right now. My wife moved it off the kitchen counter, right? But that's my biggest fear. And my biggest dilemma is setup, tear down, learning curve. And this has it in spades. This is not a beer and pretzels, obviously. This is not even a once in a quarter game. This is a lifestyle game of a different variety, just like Root is. It is. You have to have a dedicated group consistency to be able to get the full effort out of this game. It's not a bad thing. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg in the secondary market. All in all, from a relatively unknown designer and company as a first timer, yeah, killed it. Killed it. This is probably the highest ranked game I would give on this list in terms of surpassing expectations as a whole. I'm going to go a little bit different here though, and we're going to go stock down on these next couple. First up here, and I did the review on it, and Starfighter's Rapid Fire. I wanted to like this game. Real time. This is the second time in the last year that real time has let me down. And it just, it just missed something. The fighters sort of maneuvering, the die rolling, just getting stuck in the various areas, never seeming like you have enough dice to power more than 1.5 systems of the ship in the first place. And really a 1 versus 1, not really a team, has a solo mode, didn't play it, but you can see it's still in my collection. And to be frank with you, it's only in my collection because I haven't found anybody willing to take it off my hands yet. Got, I don't know, $30,000, $40,000 or so on crowdfunding. It's not a bad game, but it just doesn't make me want to play it over other ones. And so as hyped as it was as the Star Fox of board games, it just left me a little bit wanting. And I say that as someone who loves the 2-player, as you know, head-to-head duelers. So that was kind of a little bit of a disappointment. And to be frank, especially if you're going to market yourself as that, you really got to deliver, right? Like I'm just getting reminded of the Iconoclash game that crowdfunded like a year or two ago as well, which is marketed more as Smash Brothers. Is it going to hold up? Well, I mean, that's what I worry about now, especially when you're playing off a little bit of nostalgia there. The other one that was really sort of a little bit of a letdown for me, I screwed up the review, but that's okay, a little bit, was just Hamlet. Hamlet, the village building game. Again, just something didn't click with me. They just had their previous expansion campaign, which is adding more elements to the first time around. The reason you got it on crowdfunding was a deluxeified version of things. I'm not the only one that didn't like it, but there's also plenty of people that did like it. It got the golden pair from Shut Up and Sit Down. It's a very divisive game, I guess, as a pick up and deliver social economic style game. And you know what? That's where I say your mileage is going to vary, because I'm sure people love that game. I'm sure I'm in the minority as a whole. And if I wasn't in the minority, it wouldn't have done so well the second time around with the expansion. Didn't change my mind. It's not going to be an expansion type of fix for me. It just didn't click. You know what? But that's why we try new games all the time. I mean, just like Starfighters, right? Like, I didn't know that before going in. I mean, if I did, I wouldn't ask for it, or I wouldn't try to acquire it in the first place. But that's sort of the tricky part of this hobby. Stuff that you think you should like, sometimes you inevitably get it to the table. I love real-time mechanisms, right? Misses the mark for some reason. And sometimes that's just because it's not the game design that you thought it was going to be, and sometimes that's just you not really liking, what they've brought to the table in the first place. It's tricky, it's hard, so always read rulebooks and watch gameplay, because even then sometimes you can get fooled. Now we're going to stick with the disappointing ones, and this is Pathfinder Arena. We are 2 years post out of Pathfinder Arena. I did a video for their campaign or, prototype, and they basically took Pathfinder, used the IP, slapped it on a grid that allowed you to manipulate the tiles, and gave you some card play to go along with it, with some kind of unique action mechanisms of allocating the points of the strengths of the abilities that you have each round. But that was about it. And it kind of hit a wall on crowdfunding. It really stalled, and they lost money. And then they added levels, and then again, it just kind of was all over the place. And the problem with it is, even if you go back over to the page, right? The last update at the time of me filming this is, 3 months earlier. And 3 months saying that, hey guys, we're starting production. Whew. Nearly 2 years out, and you're starting production. That reminds me of Tidal Blades 2. Just where the deuce is freaking production at this point? And they say, in the comment section down here, if you scroll all the way down to some of these answered, that the previous prediction was the end of the year. Man, if you don't have an update by now, you're not getting it before the end of the year. I mean, I'm happy that some of these games don't rush it, and so that you're getting maybe a better product. Because as I always say, better product late is better than a crappy product delivered on time. I mean, crappy product forever, essentially. But I have no idea. Gameplay needed a boost up. Content-wise, they unlocked some stuff, but they also, like I said, hit a wall. Not even 1,000 backers somehow, even though they had almost like $130,000 US raised. So that just tells you how expensive the stuff was. And there was a bunch of exclusive stuff that they threw in there as well. So I have no idea what to expect with this one, when you get it halfway through 2024 at this point. Now, 2 more here. Stay with me. One of which I am staring straight off right behind the camera and the light there. And it's Resurgence. Stan Kordowski's sort of play on Dead of Winter meets Euro style. It's actually a fascinatingly clever game. I really like it because you're essentially blocking off areas and then using your workers that you're drawing from a bag in order to then secretly allocate them to one of 3 colored sections that then you put out on the board in turn order. And there's only so many worker spots that you can place, and that's going to unlock levels of your shelter as well as various victory points along the way. And it's a clever system. It works rather well. It's just one of those games that I think has completely flown under the radar because, again, it suffers from being really good. And that's going to sound weird, right? Chris, you're saying it's really good. It's really good, but I don't find myself wanting to play it over other things, right? And so nowadays, especially 2023, don't get me wrong, 2023 has been an absolutely, by far and away, the best year of board gaming, I would say top to bottom, hands down, which raises the bar, right? Like, I don't want to play stuff that I'm kind of like, okay, this is kind of fun, right? It has to fit a specific niche. It has to fit a specific person's play group, whatever. And I look at this from a Euro side of things and I go, well, I'd kind of rather just play Hansa or El Grande or Dead of Winter for the chaos. Doing things unique, it's absolutely fantastic in what it's doing, but it doesn't make me necessarily want to play it over other things. And that's a weird dichotomy, and I'm not really sure how to explain that. It wasn't a big project. None of Stan's games have done like gangbusters on crowdfunding. It raised $87,000 and over 2,000 backers. But again, as a game that raised that much on crowdfunding, you just never hear about it either. The latest one from him, Nova Roma, I'd love to pick up a copy of that on the retail. I mean, I ended up trading for this Resurgence. So it's sort of a out-of-print Grail-ish game for people, I think, in the sense that they really like it and there's not much availability. But again, I think the supply is probably equal to the demand at this point just because of those reasons. Again, I don't know what I'm going to do with my copy. I don't know. I like it. I really like it. But I'm not sure I'm in love with it. I have to be in love with it nowadays for it to want to stay. But I mean, that also brings up the problem with, Starfighters, right? Can't get rid of stuff sometimes too. I know you have that problem. I know you know what I'm talking about. So it'll be interesting to see where that one goes. I could easily see that one being out of my collection in the next 6 months. Easily from that standpoint. So last one up here. Last one up. And I was a little surprised by the ratings of this over on Board Game Geek when I searched prior to filming this. Skyrim, right? Madias's Elder Scrolls Skyrim the Adventure game. Game found, millions of dollars, miniatures all over the place, right? I've heard a lot of just every time it gets mentioned, disparaging remarks. Like, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. Every once in a while you have people that I really like it for what it is. The quests, the adventures, the combat, the situational, whatever. And it's got a 7.8 rating. Is that crowdfunding inflation for backer's remorse? I don't know. I don't really fully believe in that, folks. I think you have niche people voting for niche things all the time. That's what it is, whether it's retail or crowdfunding on Board Game Geek. I don't really believe in the crowdfunding inflation so much from that side of things. But you can tell me how wrong I am again in the comment section. The problem is when you go over to the comment section, it illuminates a few of the concerns I have already. Like the first comment I read is like, hey, I've made a bunch of mods that make this game better. Just like the video game, right? I'm not sure how I feel about that. Best for solo. Well, I mean, the whole purpose of this, right, was to sort of make it multiplayer, just like Chip Theory's version, right? So... Oh, that's also story. Well, it's supposed to be story driven, but it's not really that good. Narrative isn't really good, and it's kind of got some poor writing. Well, I mean, and still rating it like an 8 when those comments are coming out. So, I mean, I guess fun factor versus gameplay practicality factor? I don't know. I'm making up words as I go along at this point, but that's sort of where I go with this. It's going to be miniature driven. How much of this is aesthetic versus function? And I'd say based on having less than 1,000 ratings on Board Game Geek, I think maybe that answers more of my question about the inflation than anything else, because that's not a lot of ratings. Maybe there is some inflation overall then, if that's the case. So again, I don't see it widely in the secondary market, but I also don't see people widely asking for it either, which is maybe more of the telling sign when it comes to these games in the first place. So overall, I mean, to be frank, both of these games have been slight disappointments. At the time of me filming this, if we're talking about the Chip Theory ones, I'm not even sure they have the rule book out. And I think we're almost a year out from the time of that one funding. You know, not quite, but close. Which, again, scares me, right? When you don't have a rule book out during the campaign, when you're unwilling to put out a rule book, when you're unwilling to show me all of the modes that are available, I'm looking at you, Dragon Eclipse, from the get-go, it makes me concerned that all of those modes aren't going to be good. Like, I love, you know, the fact that Chip Theory is a really, really good solo company. But when I look at that and they go, hey, multiplayer, I look at that sort of like Too Many Bones, right? Or Mage Knight, where they go, yeah, this is a multiplayer game. How many people do you ever see, like, or what is the recommended player count on Board Game Geek? Guarantee it's not 2, 3, or 4. Anyway, there you go. Like I said, sort of an all over the place, not exactly as uplifting November 2021 as maybe I wish it was overall, but November 2022, wow, 2022 made up for 2021, so stay tuned. That's all I got. Stay classy. Thanks for watching. Subscribe somehow if you made it this far and you like me talking about games and stuff. So I'm done. Peace out.